into the one and going through those things. Another thing that I do is I'll play like five notes, but count four so that my brain doesn't try to always put the one on the first note, right? So each time I'm counting through, it's hitting a different note on the strings. That makes sense.
No.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So it keeps
Playing.
it, so it keeps my brain having to keep counting and not just relying on hearing the like the root note as I'm strumming or picking each
Oh,
string.
interesting. So you're saying you'll purposely count to four while playing a 5-note phrase as like a mental exercise. Interesting.
Yeah. So
Cool, cool.
if I keep this mic on all the time, I don't know. I have to keep hitting the button. Let me see. Oh, there we go. So if I'm playing something that'd be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I would count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And each time the one is that actually happening? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and actually I'd have to play an extra note to get it to do what I'm saying, which would be 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, like that.
So basically playing in 5 while counting in 4.
Yeah, just so my brain doesn't use the first note as a reset for the one. Um,
Gotcha.
Anyway, I
That's
do
interesting.
I do little mind games like that with rhythm, but
That's good, man.
I could use a whole lot of training on rhythm.
Sure. Okay, good. Well, I'll tell you what, it's 8:05, so anybody who's not here by now, they don't deserve to hear the intro of this. So let's launch right into it.
You gonna
What's up,
open with a
everybody?
joke?
Oh
You
man,
gotta
a
open
joke.
with a joke.
Got to open with a joke. The pressure, a joke. What's brown and not very heavy? Light brown.
Oh,
All right, there we go.
that's
All right.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I got so many of those.
I have a good one.
Oh, hit me. What do you got?
How far can a dog run into the woods?
How far?
Halfway.
Oh,
Because
because then he's running out of the woods.
that's right.
I like it. Clever. Very clever. Well, cool. I'm actually glad that for those of you that just came in, we were just kind of chatting about some counting issues, and that would be a focus of these classes, at least the first one tonight here. So I just prepared a little intro that I want to basically read to you guys, and from there I have some exercises that I want us to do, and I also overall want this to be very interactive in terms of like Q&A and very conversational. It's not just me talking at you. If at any point you guys have questions, please be talking. Just feel free to unmute yourself and jump in or whatever. So anyway, having said all that, this has to do with your time, your inner clock, your inner metronome, and how those things relate to counting, okay? So in his book, Musicophilia, neuroscientist Oliver Sacks explains, Galileo famously exemplified how good our internal clock is in experiments timing the descent of objects as they roll down inclined planes. Having no accurate watches or clocks to go by, he timed each trial by humming tunes to himself, and this allowed him to get results with an accuracy far beyond the timepieces of his era. It wasn't until Galileo himself invented the pendulum clock that we had the technology to keep time better than our own internal clocks. So at this point, you might be saying, I don't know about Galileo, but my rhythm really sucks, right? But you're wrong. You're extremely good at it, actually. And at this point, I want us to do a meditation exercise. What I want you guys to all do is, oh, we got someone else coming in. What's up, man? Welcome. You're just in time. We're about to do a little exercise here. So what I want you guys to do with all of yourselves muted, take a deep breath and count backwards from 10 out loud, but muted. Okay. Okay, good. Now, what I want you to realize about this, when you are counting, you're naturally speaking at a steady pace. The reason for this is that language is built on cadence, which is the internal rhythm of words and phrases, okay? So if I were to talk with an irregular cadence, it would sound very robotic and unnatural and unmusical because there's no cadence into my speech, right? So certain cadences are extremely regular, and specifically counting, okay? Counting is by nature very regular of a cadence. And, have you ever counted unmetronomically? If you have kids, has your kids ever gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11? No, everyone, when you're learning to count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? It lends itself to that when you're counting, okay? And so this applies no matter the language. It's a universal phenomenon that counting has this steady cadence to it by our very nature, our very human nature, okay? So when we play music, we measure units of time. And in fact, we literally call them measures. We divide the time into individual beats, and then from there, we may even subdivide into smaller beats and divide the time accordingly, right? So studies have shown that animals that have the ability to create and imitate complex vocal sounds like humans, dolphins, parrots, and bats, they have a natural inclination to organize time and synchronize their body movements with a pulse. So this suggests that our ability to feel time is even more fundamental than language itself, and it stems from our ability to vocalize, okay? So having said all that, how does this apply to us? How does this apply to playing music? And how does it apply to making music feel good? And the answer simply is by counting when we play, okay? The point of that whole long thing is to illustrate the importance of counting when we play. And so just by counting, we are automatically synchronizing our minds and our bodies with a natural inclination toward being in steady time, okay? So I want us to do an exercise right now. And what we're gonna do is play without a metronome. And again, unfortunately, I'm just gonna have all you guys muted and do this on your own, because obviously with all the latency and whatnot, we can't do this like as a group as I would like to. But each of you do it on your own. I was asking Jason for a good song that everyone probably knows that we could do, and I was thinking about maybe Purple Haze. Does everyone, just the intro riff of Purple Haze, is everybody familiar with that? To be able to play that? Cool. So what I want you guys to do for this exercise is play Purple Haze, but as you're playing it, we're gonna count out loud. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So focus more on your counting, your verbal counting, than your actual playing. So try to sort of play the song, muscle memory, autopilot if you can, and really focus on your counting and see how that feels in terms of your time. Okay. So everybody take a second and do that. Counting out loud and playing. I think somebody's not muted. Let me see. There we go. Yeah, I just don't want to throw everybody else off. Let's see here. I will mute you. Okay. Cool. Okay, so everybody take a minute and do that. Okay, good. Good. Let's pause that. I'm going to unmute all of you guys actually, so that we can have a little conversation here. There we go. Can everyone unmute? Yeah, good. Good. Out loud to the group, any comments or initial feedback about what you just did?
So I do this actually a ton when I'm in the car listening to music and trying to find where when I first started learning guitar, I really had trouble figuring out where the one was. And so I made this exercise of just trying to find it with lots of different songs while I was listening to music in the car. The one thing I find that that I've created a kind of a bad habit of is that I count with an inflection of the melody in a way, rather than just doing straight counting.
Like
once
pitch-wise?
you start getting, yeah,
Or...
like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, instead of just going 1 2 3 4.
Right.
And so I have to force myself to actually just focus on the count and not on trying to have it follow the melody of the song.
Yeah, that's good. And you're saying that's not when you're playing, but that's when you're listening to music.
Just when I'm listening to music.
Just when you're listening to music. Okay. Yeah, that's a great exercise because, none of your brain is devoted to your playing. You can just fully focus on the counting. And I think that's good. There's a certain level of, in drummer speak, we call it independence, or sometimes you call it co-independence or four-way coordination or whatever, but it's where you're able to divide your brain into doing multiple rhythms at once on different limbs is basically what that is, but it's the same mindset that will serve you guys well, which is the ability to isolate your counting, isolate your counting from what's probably a more complex rhythm that's happening within the song, but always being able to relate that back to, whatever the complexity is of any rhythm or any solo that you're doing or anything like that, to always be able to relate it back to the simplicity of 1 2 3 4, because it always has to come back to that. It always has to relate to that. And when you lose the grounding of where 1 2 3 4 is, that's where you get yourself into trouble with rhythmic problems and things like that. The
other thing I noticed is that I just don't listen to that music that much, but when I listen to Purple Haze right now and started counting, I immediately went to counting eighth notes versus like counting quarter notes. And some songs it's natural to just gravitate towards sixteenths.
Well, that's another thing. We may not even get into this tonight, but I definitely have future plans for us to talk about subdividing extensively because it's super important. But the reason why I want you counting for tonight's purposes in particular, I want everyone counting 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, because of that illustration I gave at the beginning about the nature of counting and it being metronomic and things like that. So, the Purple Haze, that was a great call by Jason to do that, because it's eighth note oriented, but it's not overly complex. There's a lot of space at the second half. Space. You have space, and you have the notes at the beginning part. So, counting is every bit as important, if not more, during space as it is when you're playing. It has to be equal. So the more you guys, like whatever song it is you're working on right now, something you can do this week is just play it while just counting 1 2 3 4 throughout the whole song, through the different sections, the verses, the choruses, the solo, and B, it also makes you a little more self-reliant, like you're not so dependent on hearing, maybe hi-hat or, a lot of you guys in Players Club, we have songs where it'll start with a guitar intro and there'll be hi-hats through that intro. But what I always say to you guys that have those songs is in the beginning of the song, you are the drummer. You are carrying the time and you are dictating to everyone else in the band where the tempo is, what the feel is, what the attitude is, all that stuff. It's a ton of information you're conveying in the first 4 bars of a song, especially when it's you by yourself, So yeah, any other questions or comments about any of that so far?
I was going to say that, like going back to the last comment, like listening to songs, it's easy to be like, you can start following one part of a song and the counting with one song. And then I start following the singer, I start following the bassist or the other, or one of the guitarists. And I start focusing on different parts of it. And when I do that, I realize that actually I've shifted times ever so slightly, why I'm picking up a different element in the band. And I do that in our performances also. I wind up, or like sometimes I'm keen off you, or sometimes it's Andrew, or sometimes it'll be like, there's certain times when the singer I know jumps in and I know that's right when I want to accent. But if they're a smidge different, that throws my timing off altogether. So I have to be really careful who I listen to.
Sure. And I mean, the obvious thing in my unbiased opinion is that you should listen to the drums for that.
Yeah.
But, because it's what's going to be giving you the most steady, reliable pulse. But
exactly.
That's another thing that's another benefit of this counting thing that we're doing is you're starting to have some autonomy in what you're hearing and playing versus another external, if you're playing and you're going 1, 2, 3, you can't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You're automatically already, even in such a simple example, you're having to have some independence of 1, 2, 3, 4 versus the syncopated 8th note thing, So that's why I believe that the counting out loud will help all of these things across the board. And it's great because it's on the surface, it's so simple, but then at the same time, it's so deep as well. It's really can get hard and complex to maintain that focus because you're dividing your brain span into 2 things, so once you can do that with yourself, it makes it easier to be able to do that in an ensemble situation. And like really following the singer is really the worst thing you could do, especially as far as timing.
Yeah
They're going to be leaning
on
you.
Singers are always ahead of tempo. I can speak from
they're always something, but they're not usually with it. But they're going to be leaning on us more so. We have to be strong for them to lean on. We can't rely on them.
Sid had a funny joke one time about a singer. He goes, "How can you tell when it's a singer for the party knocking at your door?" And he says, "Because they're never on time."
Oh yeah. Or how do you know a singer's at the door? They can't find the key and don't know where to come in.
yeah, it's something like that. Yeah.
There's a million of them. But a lot of those work as drummer jokes too. How do you know a drummer's at your door? The knock speeds up and slows down. We all get our share of those.
Yeah.
Well, cool. If there are no more specific questions about that,
I had one that I wanted to ask before I forget.
Oh yeah, sure, please.
It's one I've been meaning, and I'm sure it'll be covered another time or maybe later. But it has to do with BPM and how people decide or determine what the is, because I've had songs where I'm expecting like 75 and then I look it up and it's fucking like 100, it's 140 or so. It's double, so I'm like,
oh, gotcha. I see what you're so yeah, how do you, so you're saying if it's like 70 versus 140, how do you know what's a quarter note and what's an 8th note?
Yeah, I guess, or like in a song that I guess sounds slow, I don't know.
I think, I know what you're saying. I think sometimes from my personal experience, it feels like the song's really fast, but it's because of the amount of rhythm that's put into it. But when you break it down and you just count the 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll find usually it's a much slower tempo than you thought. But after they've added in, the hi-hats and everything, and the guitar player's playing, double time or something, you think that it's much faster. Is that
Well,
kind of?
yeah, no, let me say this about that. There's a there's like a mid-range of mid-tempo that like everyone wants to gravitate toward. And I don't mean in terms of speeding up and slowing down. What I mean is like, let's take, for example, the song Purple Rain, okay? Very slow song. That's like 57, 58 beats per minute, that song, So when I'm counting and feeling and playing Purple Rain on drums, that's a lot of responsibility to maintain 57 BPM, because as a lot of us have talked about in Players Club rehearsals, the slower the tempo, the greater the margin of error that exists for you to go wrong, right? So to use Purple Rain as the example of what you're talking about, if you're playing, purple, whatever, that's like your quarter note. It is the quarter note. But what I'm feeling as I'm playing it is I'm not, to use our 1, 2, 3, 4 example, I'm not going 1, 2, 3, 4, where I can go take a walk around the block in between beats. That's no good. So what I'm feeling on that song is I'm going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Because, and that's what I mean. This right here is more in that mid-range of tempo where we all feel more comfortable. So I'm providing that to myself so that I don't have the task of feeling all this space of 1, 2. I'm going, cool, this tempo, 1, 2, 3, that's manageable. I can feel that and make that feel good. And then I just orient all of my grooves and fills and everything to make it sound right in the halftime of that. See what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
And on the flip side of that same coin, a really fast song, say go with the flow. 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3. Maybe I'm going 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the mid-range tempo that you can come back to. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can always relate whether a tempo is like drastically fast or drastically slow. You can always relate it back to something that's more comfortable.
Okay.
In terms of shifting by thinking quarter notes, eighth notes, half notes, whatever the case may be. Does that answer your question? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, definitely. And it's helpful. I just started playing the drums like 3 weeks ago also.
Oh, awesome, man. Cool.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So the other thing about that, you can if you're feeling it drifting one way, you can bring it back in toward what feels comfortable. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And in terms of, I don't know if I'm exactly answering your question, because if you're saying like, how do you know where's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4? A lot of times that you can relate back to where you're hearing the snare drum. And this goes for all you guys, for all songs in general. If you're having trouble discerning where to feel 1, 2, 3, 4 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, you can listen for where the snare drum is in the track, because more than 9 times out of 10, the snare drum is going to be on 2 and 4.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4,
That's good. Yeah.
And then occasionally, man, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but there are songs where you're like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then maybe the bridge goes to halftime. Bah, now you're hearing the snare on beat 3, but that's a halftime feel. That's considered a halftime feel. You're not cutting your tempo. You're not going 1, 2, 3. You're going 1, you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you go back 1, 2, 3, 4. So your quarter note doesn't change.
Yeah.
But by and large, if you use that trick of listening for the snare drum, that's going to give you a good indication of where 2 and 4 is most of the time.
Okay.
I found that really helpful, because there was when I was doing one song, I think it was a Neil Young song, and they kept trying to orient me in quarter notes on the thing. And it was so slow that I couldn't pick the beat up out of it. And so when we went to eighth notes, then it was easy to feel it and to play it.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, that's a very universal thing, and which we can talk about in a future session together, but subdividing, that's subdividing. I mean, you guys all know what I mean by subdividing. Is there anybody that doesn't know? Okay. Yeah, dividing the quarter note into smaller groups and thereby having less increments of time in between each attack that you know what I mean? So if no one has any other questions about that, just really quick, before we run out of time, one other thing that I just wanted to touch on that's going to help you guys with this stuff is the idea of feeling both sides of the beat. And this, again, file this under the category of improving your internal time, your internal clock, and your timing and stuff. So when I say feeling both sides of the beat, what I mean is there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Those would be the downbeats, and you have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So if you're feeling, when I say feeling both sides of the beat, I mean you're feeling the downbeat, but you're also feeling the upbeat, because that's what's going to provide stability in your time, So this is a common thing. I'll say, this is a common thing for drummers. Playing the drums is all about the attack of the drums, right? Watch this. I'm going to play a 16th note on the snare drum. Now I'm going to play quarter note on the snare drum. Now I'm going to play a whole note on the snare drum. See my point? There's an attack and there's no duration of note that you have to think about, right? So you have to, for guitar, it's different, of course, because you can hit a chord, let it ring out, and then mute it. Or, you can have a note sustain and you can cut it off. But I'm trying to cram a lot into the last 2 minutes here. So if this is confusing, we can talk about it next time. But when I'm talking about feeling both sides of the beat, I'm talking about you feel your attack, but you also feel, your release of the note in time. And it's not obviously always going to be that your attack and release is on downbeats and upbeats, but you're feeling 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And when you're attacking a note, you're cognizant of how long you're holding the note, because really in the holding of the note to the next attack is where good time happens or doesn't happen. Rushing is just getting to the next attack before it's due for its time. See what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So just that's something for you guys to also think about in the next however many weeks until we talk again. So we covered a lot tonight. You guys, before we get out of here, do you guys have any other questions or concerns or things you want explained further?
Well, just as an idea, as a topic for another session, is rhythm getting buried in the performance? It's like,
what do you mean by that?
Well, it's like you can play, but you might have everything set up, but then the rhythm just gets buried by the volume of everything else going on. So sometimes it's just kind of getting a good mix out of rhythm, and then sometimes we practice in the studio, but then when we go on stage, the acoustics, the whole thing sounds so different, and then it's just a different creature altogether. So I guess has to do with getting a mix that's discernible in a consistent way through the whole performance. I don't know.
Yeah,
so it's a big topic, but it's another topic.
Sure, no, that's good. That's really good. And for that matter, you just reminded me, for all you guys, email me things you want to talk about. Send me the topics you want covered. I'm here for you. We can talk about anything and everything. So that's great that you brought that up. Thank you for bringing that up. I think, what you're saying is you can hear the clarity of your rhythm when you're at home alone, but then you lose clarity of what you're playing when you get in and it's just loud and everything's going on stage or in the room. Is that what you mean?
That, and then it's like it's hard to find a good mix for all the performers, for all the instruments, and then when you're in the middle of a performance and you can't even hear yourself play, then it gets
Well, ideally, finding the mix isn't our job. It's not our job. The rule of thumb for me in terms of stage volume is like, if I can't hear the singer over myself, I'm playing too loud. But that's kind of opposite of what you're saying. You're talking about you can't hear yourself.
Yeah.
Right. So, there are multiple solutions to that. There's maybe elevating your amp up on one of those stands where it's more coming straight at your head. There's investigating solutions with in-ear monitors, which I'm a big believer in, and I use pretty much all the time when I play for all kinds of reasons. One is protecting my hearing, but moreover, it's hearing clarity of myself. I always put, when I have my in-ear monitor mix, I always put kick drum as the loudest thing, because I can relate to that problem, because if I'm not in a proper situation sound wise, if I have loud guitars and not proper monitoring, the thing that I lose of myself is my kick drum. I mean, it sounds crazy to think you could be playing drums as hard as you can and you're 2 feet above the kick drum and you can't hear it, but it's happened to me many times, So I do that, my solution is to have in-ear monitors where I put my kick drum nice and loud, really literally above anything else is my kick drum, because also that's the element of the drum set to me that dictates the feel the most. If the kick drum is on or behind, or God forbid, if it's ahead of the beat, that's horrendous. But, if I can't hear it, I get nervous that I am not playing it well, But the other thing I would say to that is practicing at home as much as you can. When you do get into situations where you can't hear yourself properly, eventually you do have a certain level of confidence to fall back on your muscle memory. And that's where your experience of having practiced it really extensively at home, sometimes, like, to use my kick drum example, it's like, well, I can't hear my bass drum, but I know what my body feels like when I'm playing well. I know what it feels like when I sound good. So I'm going to rely on my muscle memory and my feel in lieu of the fact that I can't hear properly at this moment. That's not uncommon, that happens. So
Yeah,
that's a great topic though. I mean, for sure, we can talk about that some more. So yeah.
I have a couple of friends that are pretty advanced guitarists, and they universally say practice a lot to a metronome, but I've never really quite understood. Like, I know what they're saying, but I don't know what the exercises are. What are the effective exercises to actually do that and make it useful? So I don't know if there's maybe because there's no book on like playing to a metronome for guitarists, for dummies.
I have a book I can recommend. Yeah. I have some stuff I can share with you guys, like, for the next class. Definitely.
More guitar
I can speak on that too, because I've become a huge fan of the metronome. And you'll find even just strumming guitar, just chords, just to a metronome, you'll realize, like, you have to lock into that thing. You'll realize that you can even you can improve your playing just by strumming to a metronome, and watching and really seeing if you're hitting on that beat. And also, I've gotten, when you're practicing, if you are dead on the metronome, you can't hear the metronome. All you'll hear is your note play. And it's kind of when you're locked in, and then that kind of becomes a game to see how long you can sustain that and not hear the metronome until you start slipping off, and it comes back. You'll start hearing the metronome and you're like, oh crap, I'm slightly slipping.
You can experiment with setting your metronome at an appropriate volume where that's possible. And that's a phenomenon known as burying the click. If you're burying the click, it means that you're playing so dead on that it literally disappears from your ears, But like you said, Joel, as soon as you start to drift, because inevitably, you'll drift forward or back a little bit, and then you'll hear that click, and it's like a shock collar, It's like it gets you back on the rails. You're like, oh yeah. Sometimes you forget it's there, you're just grooving and the click is there, and you're like, oh yeah, there's a click here. But yeah, to answer your question, I mean, there's not like a book per se of like, this is the book of how to practice to a metronome, but rather it's something you can apply to anything and everything that you are practicing. So, and also, Ben, you were asking a minute ago about something being 70 versus 140. I was going to recommend to all you guys to get an iPhone app called Live BPM. live BPM. It's like maybe $3 or $4. And it's awesome because what you can do, it hears the music in real time. So I use this all the time if someone like sends me songs to learn for a gig and I have to take down like a handwritten chart and tempos and stuff. You open this app and it's a screen with a readout. It's kind of like your tuners, it'll tell you like in real time if you're sharp or flat or whatever. So this thing called Live BPM, there are actually two really great uses for it. Number one, if you're hearing a song like on the radio or whatever, you open Live BPM and you hold it up to the speaker and it'll hear the song. And after about one measure, it'll pop up what the BPM is, 80 BPM for whatever. Awesome. I couldn't live without that. Second thing is use it as a practice tool because you can put it on your music stand or wherever. And as you're playing, you have Live BPM on. And if you're playing something with a discernible tempo that's like steady enough that it can gather the tempo from just the guitar part, then if you start speeding up or slowing down, the numbers will go up and down as you're rushing and dragging. So that's a great practice tool in addition, not in place of, but in addition to practicing with a conventional metronome. So I recommend that for all you guys, Live BPM. But for sure, we will talk metronomes, being able to hear yourself, anything else you guys think of. You guys all have my email, anything. We'll talk about all this stuff you guys want. So
I have an
Cool.
easy.
Very cool.
Do you do
what's
lessons?
that? What's that?
Said I have an easy question. Do you do lessons?
Yeah, all the time, right here in my studio. I mean, like over Zoom like this in my studio.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, so the drum
FaceTime or
kit
Zoom.
would be- Okay.
Yeah, you have my email, right?